Hey guys, and welcome back. And in today's video, we'll be exploring how we are going to integrate a resource server with Spring Cloud API Gateway. Now in my previous video, which is linked somewhere here or in the description below, I had explored how we can integrate Keycloak with Spring Cloud API Gateway. Now this is a continuation video in which we will be integrating a resource server with the API Gateway such that when the user authenticates itself with Keycloak at the API gateway level, he can then access the particular resource through the API gateway. Now with this introduction, let's get started. So first thing what we are going to do is we are going to create a role in the roles section. So these are the various default roles that come in with Keycloak. I'm going to say add role here and create a role called as product_read. Okay, that's it. I'm going to save this now. Now I have just created a particular role called as product_read. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is assign this particular role to the user. So let's go to the user section, and for this test user, I'm going to go to role mappings, and here, as you can see, the product read role is available. I'm going to add this here. So now these are the various effective roles that are being assigned to the user. And now these are some of the default roles that have been given by Keycloak itself. If you want, you can remove this. So I'm removing these particular roles, and the only effective role that is present here is the product_read. Okay. Now for the client to actually get this particular role for that user, the client needs to have this particular access to it. So let's go to the client here. And in the client scope section, as you can see, the client already has the scope to access roles. So this will allow actually the client that we have integrated in the Spring API Gateway application to actually fetch this particular role. Now with this, we are actually done with the configurations required to do the role-based access inside Keycloak. Let's now create the resource server. For this, we're going to go to start.spring.io. Here we are going to add some dependencies. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a resource server. So OAuth2 resource server. Then we are going to add a web dependency because we want to create a particular endpoint and protect it via some particular role, right? So now these are the only two dependencies that I will need for now. Let's enter the group ID and an artifact name product service. We'll be using Java 16, and let's generate this project. Now I have already created the project and I have the code already ready. So let's look at it. Now in the product service, you have a controller, you have the main application here, you have a real-m role converter and a resource server config. Now let's start with the first thing. Let's look at the resource server config. Now what does the resource server config does here? If you see here, I have protected all the URLs by saying that any request that comes in has to be authenticated, and it is a resource server with a JWT token converter that I've set over here. Now you must be wondering why I kept this JWT converter over here, right? So there's a specific reason behind this, and I will let you know once we run this particular application. So first thing what we are going to do is we're going to set some properties inside the application properties. Here what we are going to do is under the resource server property, we are going to set the JWK set URI. Now this is the URI that has been used to actually validate the JWT token that Spring API Gateway forwards to this particular resource server. Now the incoming JWT token has to be verified, right? So this is verified by pulling the certificates from this URL and then validating if the JWT is valid or not. Now, where do you get this particular URI? It is the same endpoint configuration that we had seen from real-m here. So if I open this back again, you can see the JWK URI present here. So you will use this same URL here itself. That's done with this part. Let's look at a controller. Now in the controller, I have created a simple get mapping here called as /product, and I've set an allowed role on top of this. This is the same role that we had created in Keycloak and assigned to the user here. So here is the assigned role that is present, and we are using the same role name here also. Okay. So now what we have done, we have created a security config wherein we have said that any request that comes in has to be authenticated, and then we have set a particular JWT converter here. Now, before going into the JWT converter part, let me actually first create some paths inside the API gateway so that this resource server can be called. So let's go to this API gateway, and in the resources, there's a particular section here called as routes. So in this, what am I telling API gateway as? Any request that comes in for a path / product, anything, should be forwarded to the URI localhost 9191. Now this localhost 9191 is going to be the product service itself. That's why in the product service application properties, I've set the port as 9190. Going back to the properties file for the API gateway, there's one more filter that you have to set over here. That is the token relay. Now, what is this token relay? So when the user actually authenticates with Keycloak through the API gateway, the JWT token that it gets needs to be forwarded to the resource server so that the resource server can use this JWT token to check for its validity. For this reason, we have this token relay filter here. Okay. Now with this, I will start the API gateway application here. So the API gateway application has started. Now I'm going to start the product service, but this time in the debug mode. The reason is that I want to show you all how the JWT token looks like and for what reason I'm using that JWT converter in the config settings over here. Let's now hit the API gateway at 9090 with /product. Okay, so when I hit this particular URL, it actually asks me for the username and password. So I'm going to add test and test as username and password. And now we reach here actually at the request. If you see in this principle that we have here, if I open this particular principle, you have this particular token here, right? Now let us grab this particular token actually. And I'm going to use this utility called. Now when I decoded this particular token using this jwt.io site, the payload has these particular information. Now in this, if you see, the roles that are present here is under realm access. So under the realm access section, you see the roles that we had assigned here. So that was the product rate, right? So by default, when the JWT token comes in, the scope attribute has been used to define the authorities. So for this, what we need to do is we need to write a custom converter such that instead of using this particular scope, we should rather use the realm access rules. Okay. Now let's allow this particular request to get through and see the output here. As you can see, it has actually give us response from product service. User ID is this. This is the same user ID that we had on Keycloak. Now, let's do one thing. Let's go to the realm converter. Now, this is the realm converter here, right? What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to add a breakpoint here and make the same call. As you can see, the incoming JWT token, I'm taking out the claim that is the realm access here. And then from the claims, I'm actually converting them into roles. If I move to the next step now and then watch this particular evaluation, we get a simple granted authority being created here with the prefix role followed by the role from Keycloak. Now, why do we need to put this particular role prefix? So Spring understands roles using this particular prefix. Hence, we have to give this particular role underscore before the actual role for the user. Now, when we allow it to go ahead, because of this allowed roles annotation that we have set, it actually validates this and allows this endpoint to be accessed. Now to use actually this particular annotation, there's one more config that you have to add. So in the resource server config, I have set this enable global method security. So this actually allows any of the methods that receive a request to be actually checked for certain kind of role access. And hence this actually allowed me to protect this particular endpoint here with the required role. Now, With this, actually what we did was we actually made a call to the API gateway. The API gateway authenticated the incoming request by giving the login screen. Then the API gateway forwarded the particular request to the resource server because of the mapping that it has in its properties file. To have a visual look about how this thing actually works, let's have a look at this diagram. Okay, so here we have the Spring Cloud API Gateway application, followed by the client browser and the authorization server. Okay, so when the incoming request comes in, first it actually stores that particular request, redirects the user to the login page. In the login page, then afterwards the client submits the credentials, and then the client credentials are validated inside the authorization server, that is our Keycloak. Then Keycloak uses a registered redirect URL that we had set here, and then forwards the authorization code. Now the client, that is a browser, forwards this to the backend application, that is the API gateway. Now API gateway, what it does next is it actually requests an access token to the Keycloak using its client credentials. Now Keycloak actually validates this client credentials and returns an access token. Now using this access token, it then further makes a call to the Keycloak to actually fetch the user details. Now since it has the access token with itself, it actually returns this user details, and then Spring takes out the initial request and makes a call to the resource server itself. So this is how the actual flow of OAuth2 works with OpenID Connect. Now, if you see in this diagram, up till the part it accesses the access tokens, this part is related to OAuth2 flow. Once it starts actually making a request to get the user details using the access token, this part refers to the OpenID Connect mechanism. So, today we saw how we can integrate a backend service, in this case was the resource server, to the Spring Cloud API gateway. Now with this setup, the user actually authenticates itself with Keycloak and then accesses the resource through the API gateway. Now I have written all about this on my website refactorfirst.com, so make sure you check it out. Also subscribe to this particular channel to see more such kind of videos. Now if you have any kind of questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Till then, take care and see you in my next one.